is Monday, September 23rd, 2024. I'm Julie Hartman, and it is great, as always, to be with you. I hope that you had a fantastic weekend. 844-861-5537 is the call-in number, 844-861-5537. And as always, you can use the live chat, which I have a direct line to right here, as long as you keep it classy. Sean McConnell in the producer's dungeon. Hi. Good to see you.
Hi, Julie. How are you?
I'm good. I've been a little off on introducing you at the beginning of the episode, but welcome and hello to everybody who is not on camera, but nevertheless is there in the producer's dungeon. You know, we have 43 days between now and November 5th. The midterm elections and the presidential elections are right around the corner. And obviously, we've been doing a lot of commentary on this show about the Trump-Harris debates, about other things going on pertaining to this election cycle. But, you know, something that I have noticed is that there is one glaring issue in this election cycle, which I am not seeing Trump nor Harris discussing. You know, even the other day, I welcomed on Representative Mayra Flores to the show, and she's fantastic on immigration. And there's all of these midterm election races, which are focused on these big issues. Mayra Flores is running against Vicente Gonzalez to represent Texas's 35th congressional district, and they're battling it out about immigration. And just across all of the election conversations, we're seeing a lot about illegal immigration. We're seeing a lot about inflation. We're certainly seeing a lot about abortion, about healthcare. And these are all really important things. But there is one glaring thing that I rarely, if ever, see candidates on both the left and the right talking about. And that is education. Our public school education here in America is in such a dismal state that really it can be considered a crisis, which I know sounds quite draconian, but it really is true. And it is just baffling that in that presidential debate, for instance, that we saw 2 weeks ago, education didn't even come up once. Isn't that one of the most important parts of a nation, the way that we are preparing our young people who are coming up in the world and going to be future politicians, future hopefully titans of industry? Isn't that really important to consider, how we are best equipping those students? But it's kind of surrounded by crickets, probably because both parties understand that they have not done enough in order to rectify this issue. But I want to tell you about 3 statistics that have come out over the past few months, which really throw this into sharp relief. We have PISA statistics. PISA is the Program for International Student Assessment, and apropos of its title, it assesses how various countries are doing compared to one another in their student scores. According to the recent numbers coming from PISA, U.S. math scores are down 13 points from 2018. And by comparison, 28 other developed countries and economies over that time improved or maintained their math scores. So the U.S. is down 13, and then 28 of our fellow countries or competitors are either at the same levels or they have gone up. Certainly not encouraging news. This one is especially bad. We have the nation's report card, which tracks educational test scores from various parts of our country and puts it all together. According to the most recent data from the nation's report card, 2/3 of all 4th graders and 8th graders in the United States are not proficient in reading. And if you go to the nation's report card website, I don't know if we have a picture of this. I sent it pretty last minute. So, God bless you guys in there. Last minute photo you've got prepared. Look at that. So this is from the nation's report card website. We see there the reading statistics. And look at math. Grade 4 and grade 8. from 2019 to 2022, down, 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 all across the percentiles, 10th, 25th, 50th, 75th, and 90th. And I'm here on the website right now while we're live on the air, and I'm looking at civics. Civics from 2018 to 2022 in 8th grade has gone down. If you look at geography, from 2014 to 2018, it went down. If you look at math from 2015 to 2019, it's also gone down. To go on, science has gone down from 2015 to 2019 in grade 4. History from 2018 to 2022 in grade 8 has gone down. Really, it's dismal across the board. You can see a little jump in geography in grade 4 from 2001 to 2010, but those are so long ago that honestly, it's sorry to say it, but we kind of don't care anymore. From 1998 to 2002, writing went up. But that's 20 years ago. So if you look at really the most recent numbers from 2018 to now, by and large across the board, it's just gone down. And to really add on to that, so we have the international statistics, we have the domestic statistics, which is indicating that our scores are going down. We also have a recent huge problem of absenteeism. Since the COVID lockdowns, and Dennis Prager, my co-host and colleague, always encourages people to make the distinction. He says, don't say because of COVID, say because of the lockdowns. It wasn't the virus itself that contributed to some of these outcomes, but the lockdowns that contributed to them. In the wake of the COVID lockdowns, we have seen absenteeism soar in public schools. And there is a fantastic spread about this in this week's Epoch Times, which you know is one of my favorite newspapers. And what they identify is that not only have schools across the board experienced this absenteeism, but it is especially concentrated in low-income school districts. For instance, they profile the Syracuse school district, and Syracuse is identified by the U.S. Census as one of the poorest cities in the Northeast. And get a load of this, reading from the Epoch Times, quote, chronic absenteeism at Syracuse schools rose from 36%, which is already pretty bad, in 2018 to 60%. My God. In 2022, and then it went down to 51% in 2023. That is cited by the American Enterprise Institute's data collecting on absenteeism. So we are seeing that this is a huge problem around the country. And additionally, we are also seeing across the board that there are record numbers of teacher retirements. And I believe we have a video which profiles this.
I know over 20 teachers who have quit.
30, 20, 25.
Teachers are quitting by the masses.
Teachers that were just colleagues of mine were in tears coming to me saying, I'm so glad you got out. I'm so glad you got out.
Educators are quitting their jobs in alarming numbers. Schools are missing hundreds of thousands of staff, and more than half of educators say they're thinking of leaving.
And I resigned my position as teacher.
I submitted my resignation last week.
I will be leaving Gwinnett County Schools.
So why are they so desperate to get out? Teaching was never easy, right?
It's not the way it used to be.
Was it COVID?
The education crisis was very much here way before COVID.
Are the kids out of control?
And that's not it at all.
This is failure by design. The education system is crumbling because America's politicians made it fail. Underfunded, abandoned during COVID, and vilified in America's vicious culture war. Teachers have had enough. The real losers are the kids.
Well, the New York Times predictably is pointing to what did they say, the vilification of students from these school board meetings. I mean, parents are coming in and talking about the radical race and gender diktats which are thrown at their kids. For instance, in California, the State Department of Education maintains that it is discrimination for teachers to notify parents of their children's sexual transitions. We profiled an Illinois school district which has its curriculum online, and you can go and look at preschool, kindergarten, first grade, second grade, and it shows what LGBTQIA plus lessons that school district is teaching its students. So, I mean, I just think it's a ridiculous contention there that these parents' outrage at these things is the primary or one of the primary factors in what we are seeing in schools. Though the New York Times is right that really politicians have enabled so much of this change, and that's what we're going to look at today. And specifically, I want to focus on California and make you aware of 3 huge changes in the California Education Department that go from the math department to teacher priorities to disciplinary codes. And these indicate that there is a really big change in the way that we view education in this country. And for the life of me, I can't understand why someone like Donald Trump wouldn't be all over this constantly. This, if I were he, would be the thing that I would be trumpeting the most in his campaign. Now, of course, we see that these numbers that I showed you from the nation's report card indicate that we've been struggling educationally for some time. So, of course, there are many things that can contribute to that. Funding may be one of them. That doesn't seem to really accord with common sense. A lot of these schools have millions of dollars in funding, and it appears that funding isn't so much the problem as the allocation of resources is the problem. But putting that aside, I'm trying to recognize that there are a lot of factors that are contributing to this problem. But really, DEI appears to be the most significant recent revolution in our schools systems. And I would be all over that if I were Trump. So we're going to look at 3 examples here. But first, I want to tell you a quick story about a conversation I had with a friend about this, which I think is something that ought to orient us as to the way this problem should be discussed. And this friend of mine really, really dislikes Donald Trump and really dislikes my support for Donald Trump. She actually asked if we could have a phone call to talk about this, or actually maybe I suggested the phone call. I can't quite remember, but we came together to have a conversation because it was really hard for her, she said, to be my friend with my support of Donald Trump. And as we were talking, and as I was explaining why, despite all of his flaws and all of his mind-blowing mistakes and comments at times, I support him. I came to this conclusion in our conversation that I think is really valuable. And I just said it spontaneously. I said to her, I want you to understand that I am conservative because I'm woke. Sounds like a paradox, right? But this education issue, I think, is probably the best example of what I was trying to say. I was telling her about all of these revolutions in state Department of Education codes. I've mentioned the California gender discrimination one. We've talked on this show about the Oregon Department of Education saying that finding one right answer in math is white supremacy. On this show, a 9th grade student emailed me his ethnic studies curriculum, and we profiled how ridiculous and really intellectually shallow it is on the program. And I was telling my friend about this, and I said, this is why I am conservative. I do not believe in infusing our schools with these DEI measures because they harm students. I am someone who went to private school. I went to a private high school and I went to a private university. I'm lucky that my parents could afford to send me to a private institution. That's privilege. People whose parents cannot afford to send them to private institutions have to, the majority of the nation, send their kids to public schools. And it is just not fair to send your kid to a public school and have them be subjected to these blatantly ideological measures, which really harm their educational opportunities. And it makes the parents really enslaved to this government agenda. And as we're about to see, it really is a government agenda. How is that fair? who do you think gets ahead? The child whose parents can afford to send them to an elite school, or the child whose parents can't? And by the way, I think this applies to so many issues, certainly with crime. I'm conservative because I'm woke. Yeah, I don't believe in cash bail laws. I don't think they harm people who live behind gates in dormant buildings. I think they overwhelmingly harm people who are living in communities where crime is higher. Similarly with illegal immigration. Yeah, I don't think the 1% is really affected in America by illegal immigration. I think everyday people who are not, again, living behind gates or living in dormant buildings are the most affected by their cities or towns being overrun with migrants. And so that is sort of the scaffolding that I want to approach this conversation with. And so let's look at these 3 new measures which have taken effect in California over the past 2 years, and consider if these might be a part of the problem of our education system. And also we should consider if Donald Trump should maybe be amplifying these examples more than he is. But before we get to that, something that I want to amplify is buying gold. What do we think, Sean? 8 out of 10 transition?
Yeah, that was pretty good.
I think that was pretty good too. In all seriousness, right now is a really good time to tie your assets to something physical, something that has value no matter the economic, global volatility or monetary policies. Economists, to that end, are warning us about massive tax hikes that could hit our IRAs and 401ks hard. With inflation rising, it's no wonder that central banks and many Americans are turning to gold. If you haven't thought about gold yet, now is the time, and you should consider trusting Priority Gold to help you diversify your savings with gold and silver. Text GOLD into 1-800-405-GOLD for a free gold information guide and see if you qualify for free shipping and storage. Right now, physical gold is one of the best ways to fortify your savings. Act now to get your portfolio working for you while the market is golden. Text GOLD into 1-800-405-GOLD. Text GOLD into 1-800-405-GOLD. All right, let's look at these 3 examples in the state of California. The state of California is the most populous state. It has 38 million people. That's about 11% of the U.S. population. And it has about 6 million public school students and about 1.8 million public higher education students. So that's a lot of students in the state. Did you know, according to the Epoch Times, that if you look at those 6 million public school students, that 66% of them would fail to meet national math and science standards, and 57% of them cannot read at grade levels? That's pretty bad. And let's look if this new framework that California passed seems to put us on the right track of alleviating some of those numbers. Again, 66% of California public school students, according to the Epoch Times, fail to meet national math and science standards. Well, lucky for us in California, on July 12th, 2023, California passed the California Department of Education, that is, not the California legislature, passed a new framework for mathematics, which they say will be effective in eliminating some of these dismal test scores. Well, let's actually see what they are profiling here. So there are a lot of chapters of this new framework, and they have teaching for equity and engagement is one of the chapters. Big focus on equity, structuring school experiences for equity and engagement, supporting educators and offering equitable and engaging mathematics instruction. You notice that word there, equity, is operative. And what people would argue is that the goal of an education is to have equity. The goal is to have students come in and roughly get the same thing out of the education experience. And while, of course, we want equity on a certain degree, we want people to pass a critical standard of understanding to have seen that their education was worth it. Of course, we don't want to send kids to public school and have them emerge not reaching certain levels. So in that sense, we want equity. But one of the hallmarks of a great education is allowing students to excel and to maybe surpass other students. That's why we have valedictorians and salutatorians. And that kind of competition really empowers students. It makes them feel excited. Competition is not a bad thing for students to have. And so that's why it's truly, I believe, unbelievable. I believe unbelievable that they went on to recommend this. This is, again, the California Department of Education's new framework for trying to alleviate dismal mathematics scores. Here are the two main things. Number one, they are recommending that teachers eliminate tracking. Tracking is this practice of identifying students, this is according to the Wall Street Journal, who demonstrate a great potential to do well. Direct quote, by the way, from the Wall Street Journal, lest I be like the president of my alma mater and not properly cite my sources. So it makes pretty self-explanatory. Tracking, you identify students who seem to have higher test scores, who seem to be performing well in math to see if they could be placed into a higher level than they're at now. That's the first thing. They've recommended getting rid of tracking. And the second thing to that point, reading from the Wall Street Journal, quote, the framework recommends that Algebra 1 not be taught in middle school, but in high school. So I don't know if you remember your public school education, but here's how it went, or private school education too, your general math trajectory. The way it usually goes is that in 8th grade, you have, in 7th grade, you have Algebra 1, then you have Algebra 2, then you have geometry, pre-calculus, and calculus, okay? So usually, Algebra 1 is in 7th or 8th grade in order for you to accelerate into those other categories. And this framework is recommending that Algebra 1 not be taught in the middle school level, that is before 9th grade, but would start in 9th grade. So if algebra starts in 9th grade, then the trajectory would go algebra in 9th grade, geometry in 10th grade instead of in 9th grade, algebra 2 in 11th grade, and then pre-calculus in 12th grade. So by that trajectory, students would not be able to go to a calculus level by the time that they graduated from high school. That is not a good thing. You do not want to kneecap students from being able to excel or to move on to other levels if they are competent enough to do that. Why would you hold them back? This is when their brains are forming. This is when they are coming up in the world and learning all of these new skills. Why would you keep them behind if they could go and do even better? I mean, some students, I remember when I was in high school, went to not only calculus, but calculus BC. There was AP Calculus AB and then AP Calculus BC. And then students who were really good, there were only like 2 of them, went on to even higher levels. Why would you prevent people from doing that? Then once they go to college, they could enter in an even higher level. And then maybe they can become an economist. Why would you ever hold students back from doing that? But this framework, in the name of equity, has recommended that these math students start at the same level in 9th grade. Sorry, but that really reeks. I know people are going to think that this is dramatic, but that really reeks of Marxism. The whole point of Marxism was to keep people in the same kind of category, to prevent people from excelling, because then if people start becoming better at others, then that ruins the whole destruction of power structures, which Marxism endeavors to eliminate. Marxism wanted to keep people really at the same level. You know, in fact, there's this fascinating example of agriculture in the Soviet Union. There was this practice called Lysenkoism, named after a pseudoscientist, Lysenko. He was a Soviet Ukrainian. And what Lysenkoism was that it mandated that you plant seeds next to each other or close to each other because it went that no seeds of the same class could compete against one another. Now, if you know anything about seed planting, you know that you need to give seeds some space in order to strike roots and grow. If you have seeds that are too close to one another, it interferes with their growth. And so it was not shocking that Lysenkoism contributed to massive famines in the Soviet Union and in communist China. This is giving Lysenkoism vibes. This is no students of the same public school can compete against one another. So we're all going to even the playing fields and have them start in 9th grade. That makes no sense. The whole purported reason of this, number one, is that according to the Wall Street Journal, having students be at different levels damages the mental health of low achieving students. Number one, I take issue with that claim. I don't really think that that's true. And number two, what about the mental health of high achieving students who are sitting there bored to tears in math class because they can't excel? But another thing is that they think that it will somehow contribute to better teaching to just have all of the students in one class. But that doesn't make sense. You can have quality classes with different students from different grades in those classes. The principle of having the same students of the same grade in the same class does not, in turn, make those classes better classes. It really is just so sad. And again, I go back to the whole I'm conservative because I'm woke. Students who are able to go to private schools are allowed to progress. Students under this new California math framework, and it is a recommendation, it is not passed, as an affirmative practice in the education codes. It's recommended among school districts. Students who are in those school districts, such as San Francisco, where they have this, they're not going to be able to reach their potential. That's not fair. So that's the first thing. Very, very important. The recommendation of the elimination of tracking in California public schools with math, and the recommendation that they all start at the same level, 9th grade Algebra 1. But, by the way, before we move on to the next thing, something that's also ridiculous about this framework is that they want math teachers to, quote, be committed to social justice work to equip students with a toolkit and mindset to identify and combat inequities within mathematics. And then on top of that, they want teachers to, quote, teach students that mathematics plays a role in the power structures and privileges that exist within our society. So not only are students being encouraged to all start at Algebra 1 in 9th grade, but within that math class, they think that it's a good idea to have teachers focus a chunk of time on educating students about the power structures that exist in mathematics. Maybe the teachers should educate them about the very power structure which is contributing to all of those students being at the same level. It's absolutely ridiculous. And so interesting that New York Times video that we had just watched didn't reference any of these burgeoning DEI mandates and recommendations as possible reasons for why we are seeing trouble in our school system. Very curious indeed. Okay, so that's number one. Let's move on to a new framework for California community colleges, which, as I said, have 1.8 roughly students in their 116 campuses, okay? So, according to a new framework, you could probably guess where this is going. Among California community colleges, quote, faculty members, this is their new regulations, shall employ teaching, learning, and professional practices that reflect DEI and anti-racist principles. The way that they do that, according to this new framework, is that they must, in their classes, quote, develop and implement a pedagogy or curriculum that promotes a race-conscious and intersectional lens. Also, they are mandated to, quote, contribute to DEI and anti-racism research and scholarship. So they want teachers in these California community colleges to not only implement DEI in their curriculum, but focus projects on DEI and anti-racism. And, we saw that, as I mentioned, a 9th grade public high school student here in California was brave enough to email me his curriculum for his ethnic studies course. And his final project was about identifying an ethnic studies related issue in their communities and doing a whole project on it. Okay, really? When we're seeing in California that over 50% of students cannot read at grade levels, that they are not meeting national math and science scores, and you're going to devote a double-digit percentage of their learning day to this ethnic studies class and this research project about ethnic studies, it's completely kneecapping students. And this is what they're seeming to do even at the college level. And get a load of this. They have this glossary. And what I really endeavor to communicate here in this episode is that this is not a fringe thing. California is the biggest state in the union as far as population. By the way, Alaska is the biggest state as far as landmass, which I didn't know. But California is the biggest state in the union. It has the biggest economy in the union. And so if this is their framework, this is not exactly a fringe thing. Their DEI glossary has 2 things which you should know. Number 1, they mandate in the California Community College framework that merit, quote, at face value appears to be a neutral measure of academic achievement and qualifications. However, merit is embedded in the ideology of whiteness and upholds a race-based structural inequality. So they're excoriating this concept of merit. And then they say that colorblindness, quote, de-emphasizes or ignores race and ethnicity, a large part of one's identity and lived experience. So my God, why is Donald Trump not talking about this? Why is he not pointing to these examples? And I'm just focusing here on California, but there are many examples that I've profiled on this show in several other states. Why is he not talking about it? It makes no sense. This is the number one thing that his campaign should be profiling, because left, right, liberal, conservative, Democrat, Republican, I would hope that most voters, different than politicians, most voters would look at this and say, this is absolutely crazy. But there are crickets, very bizarrely, from both sides, and especially the Trump campaign. This seems like a layup for them. And then the third thing I want to tell you about today with regard to California is this new code of discipline or lack of discipline, which went into effect actually 2 months ago. So we will see how this works out. This was eliminating what we call willful defiance. So California was one of the first state in the United States to ban willful defiance suspensions. Willful defiance, according to the California Education Code, is, quote, disrupting school activities or otherwise willfully defying the valid authority of school staff. So yeah, that makes sense. If you're throwing paper planes in class at your teacher instead of learning, or if you have your cell phone out instead of learning, you can get suspended. What's the big deal? The Sacramento Bee, to color more of this, says justifications for willful defiance suspension could include dress code violations, being late to class, talking back to teachers, refusing, as I just said, to turn off their cell phone. And California Governor Gavin Newsom last year signed into law a bill that would ban this willful defiance suspensions for all students. They had some previous ban for middle school students and then, or K through middle school students, and then they extended it to high school students. And you will never guess what the reason is for banning these willful defiance suspensions. Inequities, they say. According to Senator Nancy Skinner, who is a Democrat from Berkeley, that explains a lot. This is coming from the Sacramento Bee. Her office cited, quote, the disproportionate effect of defiance suspensions on students of color, LGBTQ students, students who are homeless or in foster care, and those with disabilities. You know what? That is probably true. Especially the second to last part, students who are homeless or in foster care. I would put a lot of money on the fact that they would constitute the majority or a disproportionate number of willful defiance suspensions, because they are coming from home environments, or in the case of homeless individuals, maybe no home environments, where they are not having an appropriate structure. And so I actually think it is completely unfair to students to get rid of willful defiance suspensions, because students need, if they are not getting it at home, they need disciplinary codes in schools. It's actually a form of respect to subject students to disciplinary codes. I have a friend who runs a camp for Jewish students, a summer camp, and she was telling me about her last summer session that they had concluded about 2 or 3 weeks ago. She was telling me about this kid that was at this camp, and he has a very broken home situation, and he was really unruly during the camp and was talking back to the counselors and was making fun of other students. And my friend said that she was really hard on him. She was compassionately hard, but she was hard on him. She removed him from certain activities. She called his mother and made him go on the phone with his mother. And she said that, interestingly, the mother was blaming her for calling the mother and for being hard on the kid. The mother was essentially saying, oh, what's the big deal? Kids are going to be kids. This is not my problem, etc. And my friend was starting to fear that maybe she was being too hard on this student. And I said, no, you have it completely wrong. You were treating that student with respect. You were showing this person that you hold them in high enough regard to tell them that you do not think that this is behavior befitting of their human dignity. That you think that this student is better than being rowdy. That you think this student has a lot to contribute to the program and a lot to learn from the program. And so it's just incredible that these things are just taken to be, indicators of something bad. Oh, well, if these foster care students are being disproportionately punished, then it means that we have to get rid of this thing writ large. What if that very thing is actually helping foster care students? People immediately assume that a bad or something like a disciplinary policy is going to weaken the morale of a student. I think it, in fact, bolsters the morale of students. And just because some students disproportionately have these willful defiance suspensions doesn't indicate that there may be a kind of bias involved here. This law that they passed talks about how Black students account for 14% of the suspensions, even though they're 5% of the students in the state. That's actually not the correct percentage to be looking at. If they are 5% of the students in the state and 14% of the suspensions, what we need to look at is what percentage of willful defiance behavior violations are from Black students. That would seem to be the main factor that we should look at. But it just seems that these lawmakers are looking at evidence of discrimination instead of really evaluating here what is going on and what would best serve the student body. And another thing about this whole willful defiance suspension code thing is that it's focusing so much on the effect of the student who is being suspended. What about the surrounding students in the class? What about the teachers? Do you think it's fair for other students who are really there and trying to learn to have another student be rowdy next to them, or a teacher who is devoting their time to trying to help the class to have a student chronically interfering in the instruction? That's completely unfair to the rest of the people involved. But it demonstrates such a lack of common sense and such a lack of concern for the real issues that our public school students and teachers are facing. And no wonder we're seeing all of these crises in our education system. But again, I think the main overarching point here is that, number one, this is something that if we do not devote a large time and attention to, this, no matter who wins in November, is going to really long-term harm our nation. If we are having students who are not being subjected to proper disciplinary codes, who are being taught about anti-racism instead of mathematics, who are not allowed to excel if they are indicating that they are able to go beyond their grade levels, how do we think that's going to work out for us in 10 or 20 years? Do we think that our economic base is going to be strong and robust, especially compared to other countries? Do you think that we will be seeing people who are founding companies or who are contributing meaningfully to new technology, new ways of doing things, if this is how they're going to be educated? Certainly not. So we are seeing that we have a long-term problem right here on our hands. And then the second thing is, it really is baffling that we culturally as a nation don't view this as one of our most pressing issues. I'm sorry if this sounds unkind, but when people are talking about abortion, instead of our students not being able to read at grade levels, that is a really big problem. I'm not saying abortion isn't a big issue, but I would think that one of the things that is the greatest indicator of good outcomes in life, marriage rates, earning rates, prison rates, it's all tied to literacy. And so if we are really concerned about all of these other issues, we really should look at this one, which is the genesis of so much of them. So that's all for today. Please let me know what you think about this. California, as I said, is not the only state which is adopting all of these measures, but we have really got to zero in on this. So, maybe if you guys are involved at all in your local or state politics, really try to make this a big issue. And certainly when you are talking with people who are disparaging your support of someone like Donald Trump, please point to these DEI initiatives, because that appears to be the main cultural and institutional ideology that is leaching into the mainstream because of the Democratic Party, and it is not benefiting the people who it claims to benefit. Before we end, I told you about gold. I want to tell you about pillows. I use a lot of MyPillow products. I sleep on a MyPillow. I sleep on the Giza Dream bed sheets. I wear my towels. Well, I actually do wear my towels when I get out of the shower. I also wear my slippers and use kitchen towels. And you can get these products at a massive discount. Right now, you can get the queen size premium MyPillow for only $19.98. It's made with a patented adjustable fill that adjusts to your exact individual needs, regardless of your sleep position. It helps to keep your neck aligned and holds its shape all night long so that you can get the best sleep of your life. But that's not all. You can also get the 6-piece kitchen or bath towel sets for only $25. The brand new mattress topper for as low as $69.98. And their famous MyPillow bed sheets for as low as $25. Go to MyPillow.com or call 1-800-566-6745 and use the promo code Hartman to get big discounts on all MyPillow products, including the premium queen size MyPillow for only $19.98. That is the lowest price ever. Don't delay, order today, and use the promo code Hartman at checkout. Unless Sean McConnell has a point of view he would like to make known.
Well, I've been listening to you, and I was trying to figure out why. Why don't the candidates talk about
I thought you were saying I was listening to you, and I was trying to figure out why I was listening to you. I was like,
no, I agree
burn.
with you. It's a huge problem in the country.
Huge.
But why? Why is it not talked about?
There's
a couple of reasons that may shed some light on this. A, only 22% of actual voters have children in schools.
Interesting.
So that's and then of the top 10 issues that bother people, education is not on them. Can you name the top 10 issues that people care about? according to Pew Research.
Economy.
That's number 1.
Yep. Immigration.
That's number 6.
Abortion.
That's number 8.
Healthcare.
That's number 2.
Inflation, which is a different one.
Not on the list.
Okay. All right. Tell me the others.
I don't understand number 3. Supreme Court appointments. That's number 3.
I mean,
Number 4 is foreign policy. Number 5 is violent crime. Immigration, 6. 7, gun policy. Then abortion. Then number 9 is racial and ethnic inequality. And number 10 is climate change.
oh my God, really? Climate
Yeah.
change?
Yeah.
Well, you know what's interesting? So, okay, so again, we have the economy, we have racial and ethnic inequality, we have crime. I mean, so many of those issues, as I had just mentioned, go back to literacy and go back to your education. I mean, also that's a very lib argument. You know, people who are in desperate situations who don't have resources do desperate things. It's true. That's you can't deny that. And so it's amazing that we don't consider this to be really a big issue. I think it's because for so long we've been a leader that we can't conceptualize that we are in such a dismal state as we are now.
And one other reason was that there isn't much difference between the way Harris and Trump would treat education. There's nothing to argue about there.
See, I disagree. There is a big one because there's federal funding to these institutions. I mean, we even saw that this doesn't really have to do with math scores or reading scores or literacy, but the Biden-Harris administration overhauled Title IX, and they tied federal funding to women's sports and women's initiatives to how you identify instead of the biological characteristic of being a woman. And so I actually think they have a big say. I mean, Trump has said he wants to overhaul the Department of Education, but I don't hear him very often talking about, with specific examples, the institutional leaching of DEI. And, you know, I'll give you another example. You know, the Biden-Harris administration gives federal funding to the NIH, for instance, the National Institute of Health. And one of the provisions of that federal funding is that they would make diversity statements a big part of a student's application to work at that institution. So I think they have a lot of say. But I hear you. I mean, this is the problem with federalism. We have the federal government and then we have state governments, which can kind of do whatever they want.
That was the other issue, that the policies in education come down to the federal, the state level rather than the federal. And so it's not as big an issue for the president.
Right.
Those were the 3 reasons.
Well,
But yeah, I think you've stumbled onto something. It's a big issue that affects a lot of people, and it affects other issues. But nobody's talking about it.
well, these are the 3 things I have just kind of like gotten from these various articles that I read. There was an article in the Epoch Times, an article in the editorial section of the Wall Street Journal, and it's like, this is all kind of scattered stuff. Like, oh, by the way, you know, they want all students in California to start math at the same level. That's a big thing. So I hope that this has been helpful with alerting you to what's really going on. And thank you so much for being here. We will be live tomorrow at 1 o'clock Pacific, 4 o'clock Eastern, and another time on Wednesday. And please do check out yesterday's episode of Dennis and Julie. It's a really, really special one, which I believe is in the title. Is it? Oh no, it's significant. Your life is significant is the title. Well, it is special and significant, and I hope you'll check it out. And as always, you can email me at julie@julie-hartman.com. Take care. I'll see you soon.